10 minutes early?
You just have to come see me. I don't need the time.
I think we have one more presentation before we take a break.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Rohr. I work for Charter Communications, and today I have the privilege of introducing to you our next speaker. Her name is Christina Quick-Henderson, and she's the founding executive director of the Montana High-Tech Business Alliance. We'll be spending about 45 minutes with her, and she'll be telling you about what the Montana High-Tech Business Alliance does. What I also hope, though, that you come away with, though, is the impression and the understanding of the importance of the work that they're doing. I take in just a couple of minutes just before coming up here on my phone. I wanted to take a look at Montana High-Tech Business Alliance, some of the things that they were doing. And you have to scroll and scroll and scroll. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to look at some of the things that they've done over the last month. And you scroll and you scroll and you scroll. And one of my impressions is although Christina has become a very familiar face in most rooms, not only because of the collaboration with the universities and other groups, but really taking like the real, I think, becoming a thought leader, thinking not only about the high-tech businesses that we have in our environment, but running out in front of that and making sure that the right things are being done right now to foster it. So whether it's in August of this year, thinking about childcare, childcare for workers, childcare for employers, technology. What's the name of the group that you were in a round table recently at the University of Montana? So there's like
for high-tech workers, tech skills for tomorrow.
Tech skills for tomorrow. One of the quotes from the president of the university had said, this struck me, over 60% of the children in elementary school will end up working in completely new types of jobs that don't even exist today. And that is for me, I think I really appreciate the fact that you are getting out ahead of these issues. And they're very, very, I'm sure, delighted to have you, Christina, as the founding executive director of the Montana High-Tech Business Alliance. So a little bit about Christina. She's an adjunct instructor of entrepreneurship, management, and organizational behavior at the University of Montana College of Business, and a researcher and a writer on entrepreneurship and high-growth companies. You hold a BA. I'm telling you this as though you didn't know this. You do hold a BA. You hold a BA. But for everyone else, she does hold a BA in English and Secondary Education from the University of Iowa, and an MBA from the University of Montana, Missoula. And everyone, please welcome Christina Quick-Henderson.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. I feel like it's going to be a challenge to live up to it. Let's pull up my slides here. And I have to say thank you to Pat for teeing up my presentation as well. I feel like you are all on the edge of your seats right now to hear this underreported positive story for Montana, right? All right, we're in business. Well, thank you so much. I'm Christina Henderson, and I want to tell you today about some of the larger economic trends that are influencing our high-tech economy. I'll of course tell you a little bit about our organization and highlight some of the very exciting tech companies that are at work changing the economy of our state. First, we're the Montana High-Tech Business Alliance, so we've been around since April of 2014. We were launched in Bozeman by tech leaders there. Greg Gianforte was our founding board chair, and they created a nonpartisan, nonprofit association of tech companies all across the state of Montana that are working to connect, promote, and accelerate tech in the state. We have right now about 225 member high-tech and manufacturing companies. We also have affiliate members like in education, economic development, and the like, who are part of our association. Right now our membership is about a third in Bozeman, a third in Missoula. Those are our tech hubs in the state. We have another large group that's active and growing up in the Flathead Valley, and then the rest of our members are across Montana, but as you can see, the bulk of our membership is in the kind of the central to western part of the state. And we have basically three main pieces to our mission. The first is to connect all the high-tech companies together. So we really, as a state of just 1 million people, we really function uniquely in the nation as one high-tech community. So it's not really about any one city that's able to dominate or that's creating the bulk of this. It's really about a whole statewide association. So we have 6 to 7 member events each year. We move them all across Montana. We've met in, of course, Bozeman, Missoula, Kalispell, Butte, Great Falls, Helena. We've been to Lewistown, Montana. There's a great cluster of manufacturers there. So we've been all across the state. And we really do try to get out. I was just talking today to someone who had been to an event with me in Malta, the high-tech roundup in Malta. So this is an industry that really is uniquely impacting all corners of the state of Montana. The second piece to our mission is to tell this story. So as Pat said, even those of us, I have not lived in Montana my whole life, but many of you who've lived here your whole lives might not have heard about the extent of the growth of high tech in Montana in the last 5 to 10 years. So we're out to tell that story. We do partner with the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at the University of Montana to conduct an annual high-tech industry survey. And we do that survey of both our member high-tech companies and also non-member companies. So we invite all the companies we know about across Montana to participate in that. And so that gives us essential data that's allowed us to benchmark and then track the growth of the industry year after year. And we also work to fill jobs. So for those of you who maybe you've looked for jobs in Montana recently, or you have children or grandchildren who are potentially looking for work in Montana, or who you'd like to see move back to Montana, one of the great things about this story of what's happening in high tech is that for so long, many of us, our kids would graduate from college, or we would graduate from college, and the story was that you had to leave Montana to get a high-paying job or have an engaging career. And increasingly, with the growth of this industry, that is no longer the case. We see more and more exciting job opportunities available, and I hear stories every day of folks who are in places like Silicon Valley or Boston or Seattle, and they, whether they have a connection here already or not, are finding opportunities and moving to Montana because this is such a great place to live and work. So we do maintain a high-tech jobs portal that is on our website at mthighitech.org/jobs, and we speak in classrooms and go to career fairs and other ways try to help our member companies fill these jobs, because that's our number one barrier to growth, is finding enough talent to fill these tech jobs. As I said, we've worked for a number of years with the University of Montana, and the data and the growth over the last 5 years has just been incredible. In 2019, our survey found that this industry is growing 9 times the overall Montana economy. It pays twice the median wage, which last year was $65,000 per capita, and that wage has increased 5% every year since we started measuring in 2014. And the industry revenue surpassed $2 billion last year, which, to give you an idea of the scale of growth, was just $1 billion 2 years prior. So that top line revenue amount is really encouraging and exciting. and potentially spells positive tax revenue in the future for the state. We'll see. And we see probably three key trends. Certainly there are a lot of trends related to this industry, but I'll highlight three today. One technological, one social, and one economic that are driving the growth in this innovation economy. So the first is technological. So in the last, say, 20 years with the advent of the World Wide Web and cloud-based software, we've just seen that geographic barriers to growth for technology have been removed. And so relatively remote and rural states like Montana have been able to participate in the global economy at a pace that's just been unprecedented. So you've seen any number of companies that have been able to access entrepreneurship by, for example, buying low-priced cloud-based software and then scaling their software purchase with their companies, whereas decades ago you would have had to stand up your own servers and invest tens of thousands of dollars in order to just start a tech company. Today we see companies like, for example, Onyx Maps in Missoula was started by an entrepreneur in his mid-20s, Eric Siegfried, graduated from MSU with an engineering degree and started that company with a $500 investment. He decided he was going to build a company on the internet, and so he has a hunting technology company that he started that 5 years later was worth $5 million, and today is worth many multiples of that and received more than $20 million in growth capital investment just a year ago. So the ability of an entrepreneur to scale a company is, like I said, unprecedented today. We also have seen social factors influence what's happening in tech. So for example, the millennial generations and the younger generations of workers value work-life balance and quality of life and want to live in places like Montana that allow access to that. So for example, if you ever follow the research of Richard Florida, who's an economist who studies the migration patterns of workers in the creative economy, so people that are working in fields like tech or media, those folks are, by and large, gravitating to urban centers, but they are also, as a footnote, gravitating to states with access to the outdoors and college towns. So that's, in large part, I believe, why you see so much activity around Missoula and Bozeman today in the tech sector. And we see a lot of this tech talent that's attracted to Montana to get to work in a place where they can be outdoors on the river or up in the mountains 5 minutes after they get off of work, which is just not something you have access to in a lot of cities. And then the third trend is economic. So we have seen large-scale success in the tech sector in the last 5 to 10 years. So the biggest example is Right Now Technologies, which is in Bozeman and sold to Oracle in 2012 for $1.8 billion and has had a lasting impact on the wages in Gallatin County and the surrounding area. We've also seen any number of additional startups that are not connected to Right Now that are growing and thriving over the last number of years. So entrepreneurship is a widespread growth trend across the state as well. We saw that Montana is a hidden hub of entrepreneurship. We were the #1 state for startup activity per capita for 4 years running from 2013 to 2016. This was according to the Kaufman Index of Startup Activity. They've since changed their metrics and how they measure entrepreneurship, but given our kind of high rank on this list, we convinced the Kaufman Foundation to invest $15,000 and work with us to conduct a study on entrepreneurship in Montana. So in 2017, we published this case study in partnership with the Blackstone Launchpad and Montech at the University of Montana. We went around the state and interviewed 40 individuals, 10 entrepreneurs in Bozeman, 10 in Missoula, and 10 in relatively rural places like Lewistown and White Sulphur Springs, Columbia Falls. So we traveled around the state and talked to entrepreneurs about their experience and what they were doing. The majority of them were engaged in some sort of tech-based business. And the majority of their customers, I would say 98% of these companies' customers were outside of the state of Montana. So they're selling products and services outside of Montana and bringing that revenue back into the state and employing people here. And we found any number of very interesting findings. in that study. One of the best findings in that study and the recommendations from the PhD economist who conducted it, Yaz Motoyama, was that Montana has unique benefits and unique ways of doing business that are generating a lot of this success that we're seeing, as Montana as a hub of entrepreneurial activity, that we are not necessarily doing things the same way as Silicon Valley or Austin or Boulder, Denver, or any number of other tech hubs in the nation. We have our own unique benefits and ways of doing business, and that we should keep doing that in order to continue to see growth in this sector. So for example, some of the findings were that we have an incredibly tight network in this state and very few degrees of separation among the different citizens. Many of you probably experience this yourselves, but entrepreneurs who need access to elected leaders or to their local government, to other business leaders in the community, found that they had easy access to other people who could help them in growing their business. Unique among the cities that Yaz Motoyama had studied, Montana's businesses found government and elected leaders on both sides of the aisle to be champions of entrepreneurship and beneficial to their businesses. This was not necessarily true in every state, but in Montana, they did find that government was helpful to their business, and that many elected leaders had been to their companies, knew them by name, and were accessible to them to help support their business. And this is not something that a company in, say, California would be able to have access to easily. We also found that the entrepreneurial spirit was fed by the types of people who are attracted to, who live in Montana and who want to come here. So a lot of those people were willing to work hard. They're okay with risk. We go out and you can actually meet a bear on the hiking trail, and those sorts of, willingness to live with risk and to live with, hard work were attributes that fed the entrepreneurial spirit in a lot of these people. So we found any number of interesting things. We also saw the impact of Right Now Technologies and the scale of that one sale, the impact that had in follow-on businesses. So this is called a galaxy map, and it shows the 16 companies that were started by former Right Now Technologies employees. So for example, we have Quick in Bozeman was started by the former CTO of Right Now Technologies, Mike Meyer, and that company has gone on to thrive and to get venture capital investment from Venrock Capital. I think they've gotten $12 million so far. So you have people who worked at Right Now Technologies, who understand how to scale and grow a high-tech business, and they are now investing their knowledge and money, if they made money from the sale, they're investing that into other startups in Montana. And because Montana is such an attractive place to live and do business, very few of the people who exited that company have left the state. So the majority of them have stayed here, and they are now investing in other startups and starting their own companies. So we've seen the kind of generational impact over the years since that exit happened. And we've also seen other independent clusters of business growth, for example, the photonics sector in Bozeman. So this is a map of the more than 40 photonics companies that have started out of the Montana State University cluster, if you will. So a number of those professors of, that study photonics is like lasers and optics and those sorts of companies, and they have gone on to found their own companies, and then those companies have led to spin-off companies. Some of those have been acquired. If you've heard of Blackmore Sensors in Bozeman, they were just acquired for, I don't know what they were acquired for. They got $20 million or $18 million in investment last year, and then were acquired by a Silicon Valley company because of their technology that's useful in self-driving cars and that whole space. So we've seen incredible success around that kind of photonics and optics sector in Bozeman as well. And then there are other pockets of entrepreneurship. High-tech professional services is growing, biotech, any number of other niche industries are also active in the state. A few years ago, Mary was so generous in commenting on the that you can scroll down our website. I mean, the great thing about this industry is there's so many awesome companies and incredible stories to tell. And so one of the projects that we undertook a few years ago was to start tracking Montana startups to watch, high growth companies to watch, and top tech employers. So we have these lists that we put out every year. If you or someone you know is looking for a job in tech or just wants to know the companies that are kind of up and coming each year, these lists can be a great source of information on that. So you can find them on our website, as well as all of our high-tech industry surveys and the Kaufman study on entrepreneurship are all available on our website as well. But we, as an organization, kind of use metrics to determine companies that are more than $1 million in revenue, or have are adding employees, or adding new products, new markets, are getting venture capital investments. So we track these sorts of statistics and then put these companies together in a list. So it can be a great resource. And I'll highlight some of the companies here as I go through the presentation. This is our jobs portal website, so you can also check that out. It's updated every week, and once a week on Mondays, you can subscribe and get an email in your inbox that just shows you all the new jobs and internships that have been posted since the previous week. So we hope that you'll share this information with people you know, so that we can continue to be a resource for people who are seeking high-tech jobs in Montana. So I would like to highlight, actually before I highlight these growing companies though, one slide that's not in here but that I feel like is important data to mention is the growth of venture capital in Montana in the last 5 years. So in 2015, Montana was dead last in the nation for venture capital investment per capita, according to the National Venture Capital Association. We were actually behind every other state in the nation and Puerto Rico. But I'm happy to report that we have doubled the amount of venture capital investment per capita since that time. One of the biggest announcements of 2019 was that Two Bear Capital formed in Whitefish. So it's going to be our newest Montana-based venture capital firm. It's led by Michael Goguen, who's a noted philanthropist in Whitefish, and he spent 20 years as partner in Silicon Valley venture capital firm Sequoia Capital, which is one of the best known venture capital firms in the country. His Two Bear Capital now aims to accelerate advancements for good with an emphasis on biotech and artificial intelligence. And they plan to raise an initial fund in the range of $100 to $150 million for investments in Montana and the Western US. This is more than 3 times the amount of the largest venture capital fund raised to date. Bozeman's Next Frontier Capital previously raised the next largest fund, which was like 20 million. And Two Bear Capital, so even before Two Bear Capital launched this year, the existing funders in Montana, so Next Frontier Capital in Bozeman, Frontier Angels, Good Works Ventures, and others, are already on target to surpass a milestone of more than $100 million in total annual venture capital dollars invested in the state this year. So the improvement in access to capital is a very positive story for our state that should be told. And what I see coming with the advent of Two Bear Capital, their goal is to make the Flathead Valley kind of a new hub of venture capital in Montana and the Rocky Mountain West. So I think rather than this kind of bimodal two tech hub state with Missoula and Bozeman leading the charge, I think it's going to become more of a triangle with the Flathead Valley really leading the way with Two Bear Capital. So I would like to highlight just a few of the growing Montana companies that are helping to change what's happening across the state. This is just a sampling, so these are some of the companies that are pulled from our lists. They have jobs in our portal right now. They're growing and adding a lot to what's happening in this economy. It's certainly not comprehensive, and they're not. There's a lot more happening, so if you have questions about your community, I would love to share with you about other lists of other places, but we'll just hit some of the highlights. So the first is ATG Cognizant in Missoula. ATG is a technology consulting company. They started as a kind of remote work office. So Tom Sturgis is a native of Missoula. He had worked for many years for Accenture and other tech consulting companies in California and DC. And he decided after, the anthrax scare and 9/11 and all the horrible things that were happening out east that he wanted to move back home to Montana. So he started working for ATG out of his basement. The company's actually headquartered in St. Louis. So he worked in his basement for a few years, and then he decided that he could tap talent out of the University of Montana and start a Missoula office. And quickly, within the next 7 years, Missoula had grown to be the largest office of ATG in the nation. So it had 75 employees or something. And they had this unique partnership to train talent with the University of Montana. So they had classes in the College of Business that were training graduates, and they had all of these fantastic consultants that they were pumping out of the university. And this talent pool was so attractive that it was one of the major reasons why Cognizant, which is a global technology firm, acquired the company last year. So they went from having a few hundred employees to now Cognizant has 300,000 employees across the globe. And so one of their up and coming offices is now Missoula, Montana. And they have about 300 workers in Missoula. But this is an example of kind of the caliber of talent that Montana's tech companies are producing, and the potential of native Montanans who work in tech and have this expertise and love the state and want to plant something here is having that kind of impact now in Missoula. So they're now one of the largest, if not the largest, tech employers in Missoula. They have an all-in Missoula training program with Missoula College where they take people who have been managers at Big Dipper Ice Cream or leading construction crews, and they train them in Salesforce and business and technology. And in, I think it's a 12-week program, they produce then these consultants who are working for companies all across the globe. Salesforce is one of their biggest clients. And so it's a great example and kind of a bright spot of something that could be replicated in tech companies leveraging our university system and our education system to grow in tech. Oracle is still in Bozeman and still has more than 500 employees at their office there. The office and the technology that they acquired from Right Now Technologies provided customer service support, or like the technology platform on which customer service emails were managed. So Right Now Technologies would take all of the emails that would come in from customers and determine how angry that person was and where they needed to send that inquiry, and then deal with that effectively. And it was so valuable that they added clients all over the globe. So they now have their cloud services. One of their major cloud services offices based in Bozeman, but interestingly, they also hire a lot of remote workers in the state of Montana. So hundreds of employees who work for Right Now are not based in that Bozeman office, or they might even be based in Bozeman but not work at the local office. They work from home, and they'll work from, for whatever department for Oracle all across the globe. So we see an increase in the number of remote workers, and actually Montana is, I think, 4th in the country is one of the stats that I've seen for the number of remote workers that we have. So a lot of people who want to live here bring their job with them or find a job where they can work remotely, and that's their path into the state. Engelog is a software company that's been operating in Missoula for decades now. It was started by a University of Montana computer science professor who saw that schools were literally using maps and pins to route their school buses, and developed a software solution that made that much easier. And their software is now used by many of the largest school districts in the nation. They have apps that they've developed that allow parents to track when their children get on and off the school bus. They're working overseas, helping to bus women to school in Saudi Arabia. And so they're doing this incredible work nationally and globally, from a former sugar beet plant behind Target in Missoula that barely has signs. So it's incredible the types of work that these tech companies are doing that's kind of hidden or behind the scenes that you might not know about. Pulsera is an exciting company that's working in healthcare technology. So one of the great things about tech is that a lot of these companies are solving real problems that change people's lives. I mean, they all are, they wouldn't be in business, but some of them have a very real impact on human beings. So Pulsera was started in Texas by a former emergency room physician, and he saw that even though we have this incredibly tech-enabled world and everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, emergency medical workers were trying to respond to calls using faxes and emails and landlines and all this archaic technology. So Pulsera has created a platform that allows us to leverage smartphones and tablets and real-time data exchanges so that when the frontline emergency responders start to work with a patient, that data can start to go back to the hospital and to the staff there, and so when that patient shows up, they can have the fastest possible response time and deal with their condition quickly, which particularly in incidents like heart attacks and strokes, every minute counts and makes a difference in the patient's outcome. So they've grown like crazy in Bozeman and are adding medical facilities across the nation who are using their services. Onyx, I mentioned earlier, was a Montana startup, and the founders of this company say that this company could not have been created anywhere but in Montana. The founder, Eric Siegfried, was a backcountry hunting guide, and he realized that it was very difficult to follow land ownership in the state, in the lands that he was trying to guide clients on. So they took publicly available GIS data and he plugged it into a chip that you could put in your Garmin so that when you were out in the field, you could use your GPS and figure out where you were standing and who owned the land that you were on. And then as the technology changed and people shifted over to using mobile phones and apps, they created a mobile app that does the same thing. This company is one of the fastest growing in our state, and they also not only were able to attract $20 million in venture capital investment, they also brought in a CEO, Laura Orvidas, from Amazon, who had a 17-year tenure there and had a husband who was from Montana, so she was willing to come here. Now she's helping to scale and grow that company. And she was just featured in a Wall Street Journal article a few weeks ago about all of the CEOs that are coming out of Amazon. Like, it's been a real recruiting ground for people to find good CEOs, and we got one of them at a Montana-based company. Printingforless.com is another company that's been around in Montana for decades. They're in Livingston, Montana, and they founded America's first online print shop. So they started up as a conventional commercial printing company and found that it was kind of hard to find enough commercial printing business just in the community of Livingston. But thankfully they started at the advent of the World Wide Web, and they realized that they could take people's files, their desktop publishing files, where they were trying to make flyers and business cards and posters and things at home, and they could transfer those files into a format that could be commercially printed and then ship them across the country. So they took off like mad. They became one of the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in the nation for years running. And then the industry changed, and so that space became more crowded. There wasn't as much, the margins got narrower in the printing business, but they leveraged their expertise in that space and pivoted to add marketing technology to their services, and that sector of their business has taken off as well. So what they've pioneered this space called tactile marketing automation, where they will create boxes with customized materials. So they might have like a calculator and some chocolates and a coffee mug and a pen with their branded company logo and some marketing materials. They'll put all this in a box, pack it up, and ship it to potential customers. And that customer, when that box lands on their desk, they can get the FedEx tracking and find out that they've received it. The salesperson calls them up and says, "Hey, would you like to demo my very expensive business software?" And the number of leads that they've been able to convert for their customers has gone up drastically because people are used to getting these great boxes on their desk. It kind of stands out in a very crowded marketplace. And so Salesforce, again, is one of their biggest clients. They got $25 million in growth capital investment from Goldman Sachs last year. and again are growing like mad. They've expanded their facilities and their workforce in Livingston, also added a second headquarters in Indianapolis as well to keep up with the growth. Applied Materials is a long-standing success story that's still going strong up in the Kalispell area. Applied Materials had acquired the semi-tool operation a number of years ago, and they are still to this day making the equipment that makes the components that are in all of the devices that are in our hands today. So their biggest markets for growth are often overseas in China and Asia, and they're hiring multiple different types of positions up there and growing quickly as well. Quick, as I mentioned earlier, was founded by Mike Meyer, the former CTO of Right Now Technologies, is also growing fast and adding positions. What they have done is they've taken that expertise from Right Now Technologies of helping companies manage customer service inquiries through email, and they've applied it to text messaging. So they've taken that knowledge and that platform, and they're now helping companies to communicate through text messaging in particular, and it's been very successful and popular. Workiva is another great story of Montana's high quality of life, bringing business here. So this is an Iowa-based company with more than 1,000 workers. They do processing of big data, I would say, and their core product line or service is to help companies file documents with the SEC. So this is for publicly traded companies, it's a very complicated, cumbersome process. They have to file the documents every quarter, and if you change a number at one place, you have to change it in multiple other places, and certain departments can't know what the other department is doing in order to comply with legal requirements. And Workiva's software helps companies manage all of this more successfully. It's made them so much more effective and efficient that they get candy and flowers from their customers because it just saves them literally weeks of their lives and hours with their families that they wouldn't otherwise have, because the software, it makes them so much more effective. So it's an example of, maybe this industry doesn't sound all that, fancy and exciting, but it's really important to the customers who use it. Workiva, their second largest development office and their CTO are located in Bozeman, Montana, because the CTO had moved out from Iowa years ago after he and his partners sold their first company in Iowa. He was consulting and living in Bozeman and very happy. And when his partners said, "We want to start another company," he said, "Well, I'll start the company with you, but I'm not leaving Montana." And so he stayed, and he has now grown that office to be, I think they have 75 to 80 workers in Bozeman, and they have another smaller office in Missoula with about a dozen employees. But it's a great example of people who want to be here, creating jobs here in this industry. Figure is a company here in Helena. I don't know if you know, but Helena has kind of become a hub of financial technology. So SoFi was the initial tech company that landed here maybe 5 years ago. It's not even that long ago, but SoFi is a Silicon Valley startup that they've gotten tons of venture capital money, raised a lot of money. They've had ads in the Super Bowl, very well known, and their core product is refinancing student loans, and they're like an online alternative to traditional banks, and they were a real pioneer in this space of kind of online loan processing. But when they were getting started, they searched the country trying to find someone who could help them establish this new platform to process student loans, and the only people they could find with that level of expertise who were willing to work with this unproven startup were here in Helena, Montana. So they contracted with the Student Assistance Foundation and hired a couple of their engineers to build their whole platform. And they were so happy with those engineers and the product that they built, and it was so successful that they hired those engineers away. And then they started this development office, and the whole development team for SoFi is here in Helena. They have, I think, nearly 150 software developers here. If they could find more, I think they would be even bigger, but it's hard to find enough engineers to keep growing in Montana. And then Figure is another financial technology company that spun out of SoFi. It was founded by the same founding team, and they're doing similar loan decisioning products, but with blockchain. So kind of adding that layer of secure technology to that basic decisioning product. They're hiring all sorts of positions here. They've added another office in Bozeman as well. And so we've got this kind of hub of activity here right in town. Luminad in Missoula is another incredible story of growth. They launched just a few years ago in Missoula, and they are working in marketing technology and digital advertising. They just in 2019 were named the 4th fastest growing software company in the country, and they made the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies, and they're number 29 on the list last year in the whole country. I think they grew like 7,000% over the last 3 years. They're now up to maybe 75 employees in Missoula. So this is a great example of how quickly these companies can grow and create jobs and add to Montana's economy. Zoot Enterprises is another major software company that's been in Bozeman for decades. They launched, I think, 30 years ago and just had an anniversary this last year. But they're also in financial technology and credit processing. So their founder, Chris Nelson, was from Billings, moved to Bozeman, was working in banking and IT, and kind of gone in on that first wave of the growth of cloud technology, and now works with 3 of the top 5 largest banks in the country, processing loans and other financial products. And they have hundreds of workers in Bozeman. They've added another office in Billings and are continuing to grow and kind of combine the expertise of finance and technology. And then the last company on my list is Campgrounds of America, which sometimes people don't realize that Campgrounds of America was founded in Billings, Montana, and it was. But this is an example of a company in a traditional industry that's operating in hospitality that is growing and changing and leveraging technology to continue to grow that company into the modern era. They have a new woman CEO, Toby O'Rourke, who is kind of, her vision is to leverage their current technology. So currently when you book a campsite through KOA or you need to order firewood or whatnot, all of that is managed through technology and mobile platforms. But they also see the growth of the company is happening in like that digital online marketing space. Like that's where their future is headed. So even for industries like construction or healthcare, technology is transforming all of those industries and creating jobs and opportunities for Montanans. So there's my list again, my contact information, and I think we do have a few minutes for questions if you have any.
Christina, can you make that slide presentation and put that online or something that we can get that?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's where we know why the income tax is still high. These big time jobs.
What do you see as the biggest detractor for tech companies coming to Montana?
Well, actually, we asked that question in our survey. So we know from 5 years of data, we asked them what is the #1 advantage in doing business in Montana. So #1 is quality of life. So, we interpret that as at the outdoors, the beautiful environment, the friendly communities that we have. And #2 is the quality of talent, so the high quality of workforce. One of the things that came out in our survey over and over again was how good the workers are. And in the tech industry in particular, the quality of workforce and also the lack of turnover in workforce is a huge advantage to doing business. So in high tech, if you look at places like Silicon Valley or Seattle, those employees turn over, 6 months, 18 months, a year. It's very common. And our Montana companies have loyal and happy employees who love their jobs and love the companies they work for, and so it's just unheard of the level of retention that we have in the industry. So you hear of companies like, for example, Elixir is a marketing services company in Bozeman that was acquired by Proficient, and they work for companies like Fitbit and other firms that are based in Silicon Valley, and their employees would become like the source of knowledge for that client, because the clients would turn over their employees all the time, and it was the Elixir employees that kind of knew what was going on with their accounts and could keep up with everything. So it's a huge advantage in business, a huge cost savings, and so those are some of the main advantages for sure.
Not really a question, but more of a comment. I met with Trent Birds, who I'm sure you know, new president of the Photonics Industry Alliance, and just last month, and he was telling me that the industry statewide right now, there's more than 220 open positions within the industry that are unfilled. So there's currently 800 employees and about 35 companies within the sector. But he said the next year they expect that 220 to go up to 450 if those positions remain unfilled. And I asked him, I said, well, does the state have any graduate level training programs or graduate level education in photonics and optics? And he said no. And I was absolutely floored, particularly coming from Tucson and Phoenix, that has the second largest photonics industry sector in the state, but a really robust graduate programs in photonics and optics at University of Arizona. And I was just curious if you had any thoughts on why is there not a graduate level training program at MSU for photonics and optics?
That is a good question. I don't know the specifics to answer that question, but I will say one of the challenges that we've seen in trying to keep up with the workforce demand is just that the pace of education and the ability of the university system to onboard new programs, like the timeline for that takes years compared to the pace of business. Like we needed workers yesterday, and in the next few months we'd love to have a program. But there have been some success stories, like I know Gallatin College in Bozeman has added a photonics specific, I think it's a technician program, so that they can train some of those lower level support positions. I don't know about the ability of MSU to add the higher level, but I have seen that at either either Missoula or Bozeman or at other colleges across the state that the university systems are very willing to work with high tech. So we've had some great productive meetings recently with President Bodner in Missoula to talk about what are the ways that the University of Montana's really affiliated colleges can step up and provide those tech skills for tomorrow and help to train tech workers that are needed. Some of the jobs certainly are very technical and specific, which can be challenging. So if you need an engineer in a particular thing or a PhD in something, that can be a little bit harder to attract. And certainly we've heard consistently from companies that they've had good success with entry-level positions where they're hiring new college graduates into jobs where they can train them, or they don't need to have as much experience, where they're having particular challenges with those highly skilled or later career positions where it's harder to attract people, and we're kind of trying to tackle that on multiple fronts. But
Christina?
yes.
So how about the high-tech businesses in Montana find the infrastructure that we have? Is it adequate? Is it just getting by?
Well, I will say, so we asked them on the survey, what is the biggest barrier to doing business? Top on the list is talent, and then second on the list is usually venture capital or kind of visibility to markets. And somewhere down below those top answers is, access to broadband and infrastructure. So it is on the list, but from what we can tell, it hasn't kept anybody from being able to do business, especially in the major cities, for example. And broadband is an interesting, that's probably the main infrastructure piece that influences our industry, and it's vitally important, particularly if we want tech to continue to spread into our rural and tribal communities. We have some great examples. I know we've talked to like Dr. Jane Morrow and her husband who moved to Montana. They moved to Choteau from the DC area, and their broadband at their home in Choteau was actually faster than what they'd had in suburban DC. So it's not necessarily true that, you know, we can't get good broadband. I know like White Sulphur Springs has fantastic broadband. So places that you might not expect, you actually can get really good connectivity. But then we've also heard stories like from ticketprinting.com, which is headquartered in Bozeman but has a large facility in Harleton, Montana. They love to hire customer service agents who live in rural Montana because those people are super friendly and take the time to really help people with their customer service needs. But when they hire those people that are living at home on their farms and ranches, they have to do a test to make sure their broadband is fast enough to be able to, so that the technology can keep up with the need for the calls. And so if those individuals don't have fast enough broadband, they can't give them the job. So it is vitally important that we get out to the last mile and are continuing to improve the service. And I know that we have a lot of the Telecommunications Association and others are working on that, but for the most part, it's pretty good and it's sustaining the industry.
Christina, I'm from Bozeman. How big a piece is the remote worker involved in all this tech stuff? Because the traffic in Bozeman has really gotten out of control in the morning and the evening. How big is that as far as what they can offer people to help eliminate that type of stuff?
Yeah, so much depends on the company and their culture and their choices about whether they want employees in the office. So I know you'll talk to some companies like Elixir that I mentioned, where they really want, or PFL, they want the employees in the office. They feel like it's important to their business and company culture and the communication among employees. And then you have other companies like Oracle, for example, where it's built into their culture that they do remote work. So it really depends. One trend that we've seen that's kind of unfortunate for Montana companies is that, like, particularly when these great Montana companies get acquired, they then become targets for out-of-state companies that want to poach their employees. So they'll come in to a company like an ATG or an Elixir, and they'll say to that employee, hey, I'll let you work from home and do the same job, but I'll pay you 15 or 20% more. And they'll pick off employees that way. So it's actually led to Montana companies having to compete against companies that will hire remote workers in Montana. So there's kind of complexities to that question that add to the interest. But it's good news, I guess, for Montana workers, and that they would have more options for being able to work from home and stay off the roads if they wanted.
Do you have any kind of an idea how many people in Montana work from home?
How many? I don't know the numbers, but we should find that out. It would be really interesting to know. I just know it's a lot and growing. Mm-hmm.
We have a break coming up here until 3:30, but please join me in thanking Christina for coming here today. We do have a gift for you as well. We'll see you back here at 3:30, please.